The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding the customary 30 minutes. Mr. Speaker, it is now after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were scheduled to be on the floor today around noon, but when I came to the floor prepared to debate this rule, we were told first to wait and then that the House would recess so that Republicans could go back behind closed doors to negotiate among themselves. This is becoming a pattern in this Congress. For the second session week in a row, the Rules Committee met far into the night and reported out completely closed rules that allowed no amendments on the floor. And now, after Speaker McCarthy realized that he couldn't pass his own bill, he spent all day negotiating in secret to twist people's arms to get enough votes from his own party to get this bill or the rule passed on the floor. No one has seen what's coming out of the backroom deal today and allegedly moving to the floor under this very rule. This isn't how you run the people's house, although it's apparently how the new House majority runs the people's house. Backroom deals that prioritize politics over policy or people. Turning to the matters at hand, this rule moves 2 bills to the floor. The first is H.R. 2, although, as mentioned, we still don't know what the final version of that bill will be. We should all be able to agree that immigration and border security present vast and complex issues. Despite my colleagues' pronouncements to the contrary, we all want a secure border that protects our national security. But we also need to address the realities of migration, the forces that are driving families, even young children, to flee their homes, and the serious workforce shortages confronting businesses in our country and elsewhere. Given the complexities of these issues, they require comprehensive and nuanced solutions. H.R. 2 is neither. It's a great example of the old adage, for every complex problem, there's a solution that is simple, clear, and wrong. During my legal career, I spent decades working on immigration cases and within our immigration system. I know it's underfunded and dysfunctional and has been for many, many years. We also know that American businesses, small and large, are asking for immigration reform so that they can hire the healthcare, agricultural, research, food service workers they need. Solving these issues is not simple, but I'm extremely disappointed that my Republican colleagues want to create more chaos by bringing an extremist, cruel, and completely unworkable bill to the floor today. The truth is, this isn't responsible or serious governance. And without any real proposal, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle resort to conspiracy theories, fact-free rhetoric, and political theater designed to stoke fear and chaos to distract from their lack of real solutions. We've seen how the failed and inhumane immigration policies of the prior administration weakened our economy, undermined our moral standing in the world, inflicted unimaginable cruelty upon defenseless migrant children, and did not make us any safer. However, Republican extremists want to take us back there again. Once more, they'd rather fixate and waste American taxpayer dollars to build a wall that the experts, including Customs and Border Patrol, agree will not solve the issue. And I must call out the dishonesty of claiming that families seeking legal asylum are a source of the very real scourge of fentanyl and other dangerous drug trafficking. We know from Customs and Border Patrol data that over 90% of fentanyl seizures occur at U.S. ports of entry, in trucks or cargo ships, not in areas that a border wall might cover. Despite this fact, the bill fails to provide needed resources at ports of entry to fight fentanyl smuggling, where it's actually happening. And just last month, House Republicans voted to cap non-defense discretionary funding, which, according to DHS, would result in the cutting of 2,400 Customs and Border Patrol officers and agents that do this work, fighting the scourge of fentanyl. How can we begin to craft measures to address either the fentanyl crisis or humanitarian issues at our border if our Republican colleagues insist on starting from a place of misplaced blame and misguided policies? Additionally, this bill, or at least the most recent version of it that we've seen, enacts a nationwide E-Verify system without providing other reforms that give meaningful pathways for undocumented workers to legalize their status, as employers across this country are screaming for. In doing so, this provision has the potential to wipe out half of our agricultural workforce, cause huge disruptions in our nation's food system, allow a mass offshoring of jobs, and sink American farms from California to Pennsylvania and throughout states across the nation. This isn't the first Congress in which Republicans have tried to move forward on this E-Verify proposal. And in every Congress, it faces opposition from the small business community, civil liberties groups, religious organizations, agricultural organizations and growers, privacy advocates, libertarian think tanks, and immigration reform groups, because it fails to address our broken immigration system in a meaningful way. And this time around is no different. H.R. 2 also bans the Department of Homeland Security funding for critical nonprofit and religious partners that provide shelter, food, legal assistance, and other aid to vulnerable immigrants. That means a faith-based NGO that helps an Afghan refugee to find housing or gives support to a woman here on a U visa, that's a special status set aside for victims of crimes, will no longer get assistance to do that important work. How can our Republican colleagues say this bill is only about border security when it clearly and cruelly rips resources away from those in the country legally, too? And when it comes to this bill, the immoral policies do not stop there. This legislation puts children in harm's way, the very ones the other side of the aisle claims they want to protect. Children come or are brought to the U.S. because the conditions in their home countries are so horrific, whether due to poverty, violence, corruption, or climate change, and how it's destroying their way of life. This is a situation that's been building for decades, and H.R. 2 does nothing to address it. During my legal career, I represented many of those children, those who were orphaned, those who were fleeing gang violence, starvation, or abuse. If we really want to protect child victims of trafficking or children separated from their parents who arrive at our border, we don't limit their access to representation as this bill does. We give them the tools to make the case that they're eligible to stay in this country, which a child simply cannot do unless they have a qualified attorney with them. I've seen up close how important representation is to anyone trying to navigate our immigration system, but especially kids. When our colleagues say they want to send unaccompanied children home to safety, they're turning a blind eye to reality. The reality that for most of these kids, there is no safe home. Their parents are dead or otherwise unavailable, and country conditions are so dangerous that the journey to our border is a safer alternative. This bill would expose children to the very harms and exploitation my Republican colleagues hollowly insist they want to prevent. In addition to limiting children's access to counsel, the bill allows them to be jailed. It guts the protections of the Flores Settlement Agreement, which has governed the conditions of children held in government custody for 26 years. In doing so, the bill upends a carefully crafted system to minimize the detention of children due to the grave impact that it has on their physical and mental health. The evidence is clear. No amount of detention is safe for kids. Even a short period can cause long-term harm, like psychological trauma and mental health risks. Despite knowing this, my Republican colleagues wrote a bill that allows the long-term detention of minors who arrive in the U.S. and that jails kids and their families indefinitely. I want to describe for a moment a tragic situation this bill creates. A mother and her child fleeing violence or starvation at home come to America in search of safety and legal asylum. When she finds the ports of entry are closed, which this bill would do, that mother takes her child and crosses between them. She then follows the rules and applies for asylum. To be clear, she's not a risk for flight or violence. Even so, this bill requires that she and her young child could be jailed for what could be years if she's prosecuted for the misdemeanor of unlawful entry, a result that's prohibited by current law and the Flores litigation. And this legislation falsely states it's consistent with the Flores decision, although it's clear that it's not, and that the court has already ruled on that precise point. If my colleagues want to come together and meaningfully work on immigration reform, it can't start from a place of cruelty against the most vulnerable. Instead, we need to recognize both the horrific conditions that cause migrants to flee their homes and the meaningful contributions that immigrants make to our country. And critically, we must provide functioning pathways for people to enter the U.S. lawfully. The second bill here is H.R. 1163. So in addition to their misguided immigration plan, today House Republicans are bringing up a harmful bill that hinders anti-fraud programs, opens up new pathways to fraud in unemployment insurance programs, and opens workers up to surprise bills through no fault of their own. My colleagues want to attack unemployment insurance, a benefit that helped millions of Americans stay afloat during the depths of the pandemic. Of course, it's important that we prevent fraud in our public programs, and instances of fraud in unemployment insurance absolutely should be addressed and prosecuted. In fact, just this morning, we learned that a Republican member of this chamber was indicted in New York on charges that, among other things, he allegedly stole public funds by fraudulently collecting pandemic unemployment benefits. I hope all my colleagues agree that stealing public funds, especially during a global pandemic when so many working people lost their jobs and needed the support to keep their families healthy and fed, is unacceptable and absolutely should disqualify someone from serving in the United States Congress. However, although my colleagues across the aisle claim that they want to fight fraud in unemployment insurance, their leadership continues to welcome the votes of this alleged fraudster in order to push a deeply unpopular and extremist agenda. And they want to pass a bill that makes it harder to catch the kind of cross-state fraud that their colleague has allegedly committed by slashing $400 million in critical funding for Department of Labor anti-fraud programs. It opens up opportunities for fraud in UI programs by halting the rollout of new identification verification systems. And the legislation allows states to send surprise bills to workers for accidental overpayments of unemployment insurance benefits made during the pandemic. These overpayments were made to workers who did nothing wrong and did not know they had been overpaid. These people spent their unemployment insurance on necessities like food for themselves and their children. They returned to work as soon as they could. But now, Republicans with this bill want to send these working people a bill and punish them for an error that they didn't commit. Ultimately, both of these proposals from my Republican colleagues are unserious and unworkable. They'll wreak harm on America's economy, especially businesses unable to find workers to grow or even survive. They'll wreak harm on working families, law-abiding immigrants, and terrified refugees who have the right to seek asylum at our borders. These bills are political stunts to stir up extremist supporters, not serious solutions to complex problems, problems that require comprehensive and nuanced solutions. We're eager to work with responsible legislators from any party on an immigration bill that truly secures the border, protects dreamers, and solves the workforce challenges we're seeing from farms to pharmacies. Such a bill would grow our economy, help our communities combat crime, and stem the flow of illegal drugs into our country. We firmly believe that we can reach an agreement that secures our border and reforms our immigration system in a way that reflects fundamental American values, and we're ready to work on that now. We welcome assistance in that from the House majority. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves.